It wasn't until the server asked if I was still waiting on the rest of my party that I realized just how far I'd fallen out of their lives. I looked at the empty chairs around the table, then back at her kind, confused face. "No," I said gently, folding the cloth napkin over my lap. "It's just me. Thanksgiving. A long table reserved under my son's name, photos already surfacing online, smiling faces, sweet potatoes, wine glasses raised mid-toast. Every one of them was there, except me. They didn't forget to invite me. That would have hurt less. They just didn't think I needed to be included. And when I didn't show up, when I didn't call or send my usual green bean casserole, I got a text at 8:42 p.m. from my daughter-in-law. "Everything okay? Thought you were coming?" That's when I checked the group chat, or tried to. The chat, our family thread that used to ping every few hours with baby photos, soccer schedules, birthday memes. It wasn't there. I scrolled. I searched. Nothing. I clicked on my son's profile. The group was still active, I could see that much. But I wasn't in it anymore. I had been removed. Quietly. Deliberately. Like pruning a dead leaf off a stem. I sat there in that restaurant, my fork untouched. And I let the realization settle in. They'd planned it all. The meal, the reservation, the dress code. And not a single person had thought to say, "Hey, what about Mum?" I wasn't needed for childcare, or my potato salad, or even just to fill a seat anymore. So they let me fade, not angrily, not cruelly, just efficiently, like someone folding away a tablecloth they didn't plan to use again. The waitress came back, her pen ready. "Can I get you started with something?" I glanced down at the menu, though I already knew what I wanted. "The salmon," I said, "and a glass of white. Nothing too sweet." She nodded and left. I didn't touch my phone again. I didn't cry. That surprised me. The tears had already lived their lives in other nights, quieter nights, when I'd sat in my little den, wondering why the phone never rang. Why Sunday dinners had shifted from my table to theirs. Why I'd started learning about my grandchildren's milestones from Facebook instead of phone calls. What I felt that night wasn't grief. It was something older, something steadier, a recognition. I had let myself become convenient. There was a time I was the center of it all. Not out of vanity, but necessity. Halloween costumes didn't sew themselves. Sick days meant my soup. When someone needed a ride, a cake, a hand, it was mine. I did it with joy, mostly, and when my husband passed away, I leaned into being useful like it was the only solid ground left. But usefulness has an expiration date, apparently. After dinner, I walked home. The night was quiet, save for the crunch of leaves under my shoes. In my entryway, the light I'd left on glowed like an old friend. I hung up my coat, poured myself a second glass of wine, and sat in the chair by the window. No more guessing where I stood. They had told me, not in words, but in silence, in exclusion, in digital absence. I wasn't part of the family group chat anymore, but I was still here, and I still had something to say. The next morning, I reread the message. "Thought you were coming?" That was it. No apology, no explanation, just a tap of guilt sent my way like a tennis ball they didn't care if I returned. I didn't answer. I didn't have the words yet, not the right ones, and I was done sending polite replies to impolite questions. Instead, I opened my laptop, the same one they once teased me about, said it sounded like a microwave when it booted up. And I searched, "How to check if you've been removed from a group chat." Turns out there's no official alert, no banner or beep. They just take you out, and the conversation continues like you were never there. A ghost at a dinner table that's been cleared. I clicked on the old backup messages. The last time I was part of the chat was nearly 2 months ago. After that, nothing. No notifications. Just quiet. Like someone slowly turning down the volume until even your own name sounds strange. I remembered the last message I sent, a photo of an old Polaroid I'd found while organizing boxes. My kids at a beach in Galveston, covered in sand, holding juice boxes. I wrote, "Look what I found. Remember this trip?" No one replied. Not even a heart tap. That must have been the moment. The silent vote. Someone, probably my daughter-in-law, decided the conversation needed pruning. They didn't block me. That would have been loud, obvious. They just shifted the party to a room where I wasn't invited, kept me on the outside of something I once built. So, I called Helen. Helen and I met at church potluck years ago, bonded over the fact that we both put too much paprika in our deviled eggs and didn't apologize for it. She was the one person who still called to talk, not just text. And she picked up on the second ring. "I got cut out," I said. She didn't ask from what. She knew. "Oh, honey," she breathed. "Again?" That hit me harder than I expected. Again. Because this wasn't the first exclusion, just the most formal. There had been signs, invitations that never came, plans I found out about after they happened. My son once joked, "We didn't think you'd want to come, Mom. It's not really your thing." But I would have. I always would have. Helen sighed. "You coming over, or should I come to you?" I said I'd walk over. Her apartment smelled like cinnamon toast and dust. She had the same floral couch she's had since the 90s, and 2 cats that hated everyone except her. We drank instant coffee and sat without filling the silence. That's the thing about women our age. We don't need noise to feel understood. After a while, she said, "So what now?" I didn't know. I truly didn't. My whole life, I'd been orbiting their needs. Babysitting, baking, driving, organizing. And when I wasn't doing something, I was waiting for a call, for a visit, for a reason to matter again. Without them, who was I? "You book the table," she said suddenly. "Make the reservation." "For what?" "For yourself, for next year. Or hell, next week. Make a dinner plan with your own name on it and show up dressed like you're the guest of honor. You've earned that." I laughed, but the kind that caught in my chest. Because I hadn't felt like the guest of honor in years, just the help. When I got home that night, I opened my closet and ran my hands over my blouses, the scarves they'd never noticed, the necklace I wore every Easter, but which no one ever mentioned. And I thought, maybe I don't need them to see me anymore. Maybe it's time I see myself again. The next morning, I made a reservation. Table for 1. Friday night. Window seat. I didn't text anyone to tell them. I just pressed confirm. By Thursday evening, the messages began again. First from my son, Dan. "Heard you were upset. You could have just said something." Then, hours later, from my daughter-in-law, Colleen. "It wasn't personal. We just needed to keep things streamlined. The chat got too big." Streamlined. That word rolled around my tongue like something synthetic and tasteless. Was I clutter then? An outdated feature that slowed things down? I didn't answer. Dan followed up with, "You kind of overreacted. It was just dinner." There it was. The old reflex kicked in. The urge to explain myself, to downplay my feelings, to smooth over their thoughtlessness like a wrinkle in a guest towel. But I caught myself. No, Martha. Not this time. That Friday I wore my navy blouse, the one with the tiny pearl buttons. I took extra time with my hair. I wore perfume, the one Paul used to say reminded him of honeysuckle after rain. And I went to that restaurant alone. The hostess smiled when I gave her my name. "Table for 1, of course," she said, without pause, like it wasn't strange at all. And it wasn't. It shouldn't be. She led me to the window seat. Candlelight flickered gently in the low glass holder. I placed my purse on the chair beside me and ordered a glass of wine. To my surprise, I wasn't the only one dining solo. Across the room sat a man in a tan jacket, reading a paperback between bites of pasta. By the bar, a woman with silver hair scribbled in a notebook while sipping something dark and neat. No one stared at me. No one pitied me. The world did not tilt off its axis because an older woman took herself to dinner. Halfway through my roasted chicken, my phone buzzed. Again. Another message from Dan. "Can we just talk? You're being kind of dramatic." I stared at it. Let it sit there like a fly on a white plate. I remembered the last time I had called him just to chat, about a documentary I'd seen, or maybe the weather. He had rushed the call, said he had a meeting. That was 3 months ago. I remembered offering to babysit during their anniversary trip. They said no, Colleen's sister had it covered. "But thanks," they added. Like I was a substitute teacher, not the woman who once rocked their son to sleep through an entire summer of colic. Now I was dramatic, for noticing I'd been erased. I typed and deleted 3 replies before finally setting the phone face down. When dessert came, a tiny crème brûlée with a sugar crust that cracked like autumn leaves. I ate it slowly, savouring, letting myself be. There was no conversation to lead, no crumbs to sweep, no one across the table waiting for me to finish so they could talk about themselves again. I paid the check. I tipped well. I thanked the staff like they were old friends. And when I walked out into the cool evening, I felt something loosen in my chest. Not forgiveness, not yet, but space. Room to breathe, to think, to decide what I wanted without running it through the filter of everyone else's expectations. When I got home, I didn't check my messages. Instead, I made tea, sat by the window, and for the first time in months, I felt full. Not just from dinner, but from the quiet knowledge that I had done something for me. No explanations, no apologies, just me. It's funny what people remember when they need you, and what they forget when they don't. The next week, Colleen sent me a picture of my grandson holding a finger-painted turkey, the kind made from traced hands. She wrote, "He wanted you to see his art," with a smiley face, as if we were mid-conversation, as if the silence and the absence hadn't happened. I stared at it a long time. That little boy had once refused to sleep unless I read the same book 3 times, in the same silly voice, every night. I missed him. Of course I did. But that wasn't the point. The point was, they had rewritten me, shifted my role from central to optional, from needed to occasional. And now they wanted me to act as if I hadn't noticed. They wanted me to pretend. I used to be the one who planned every birthday. I made the banners by hand, baked cakes from scratch. I had boxes in the attic filled with old centerpieces and folded crepe paper and photo props, all labeled and stored for next time. I never missed a school play, even the ones where my grandkids only had 1 line. I clapped louder than anyone. Now they sent me pictures after the fact, a token, a crumb. It wasn't malicious. That's what made it worse. They weren't being cruel, just casual, careless. The way you forget the light was ever on because now it's daylight. But I remembered. I remembered all of it. I remembered Colleen's first miscarriage, how I sat beside her in the hospital while Dan was stuck in traffic. I brought her socks and a sandwich, held her hand while she cried, and whispered that she was still a mother. She called me her second mum that day. I remembered Dan's first job interview after being laid off, how I ironed his shirt and wrote out questions on index cards to help him prepare. He didn't ask me to. He just showed up with his nerves, and I showed up with support. Now I was dramatic. Now I was sensitive. Now I was the one who needed to chill. I didn't say any of this to them. Instead, I cleaned out the attic. Box by box, I carried down all the memories I had once saved for them. The baby blankets, the Halloween costumes, the ornaments with their names on them in glitter glue. I sorted what I wanted to keep and what I was ready to release. There was a freedom in it I hadn't expected, like I was no longer curating a museum of who I used to be for their benefit. One box was filled with old letters, birthday cards, Mother's Day notes. One from Dan at age 9 said, "You're my hero, Mom. I hope I grow up to be just like you." I traced the handwriting with my finger. That boy still lived somewhere inside the man who now said I was being unreasonable. I didn't cry. I didn't ache. I just closed the lid, tied the box with twine, and placed it back on the shelf. That night, I wrote in my journal, "They forgot what I gave, but I don't have to forget who I am." And that felt like a beginning. There's a peculiar kind of silence that settles when you stop reaching out. It's not peace, exactly. More like an echo of all the times you filled the gap so they wouldn't have to. I used to text good mornings. I used to call after dentist appointments to ask how it went. I remembered birthdays without Facebook prompts. I reminded them to send thank you notes, to wear sunscreen, to call their aunt. Now the phone sat still on the counter, no longer buzzing, no longer blinking. No one noticed the quiet. No one asked why it got so quiet. That's the thing about being the one who always reaches. People don't notice you've let go until they fall forward, and no one's there to catch them. I filled the days differently. I baked bread for myself, not for guests. I rearranged the living room just to see if it felt better. I tried a new shade of lipstick at the drugstore. Too bright, maybe, but why not? I sat in the garden with a book and no deadline. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't a reinvention. It was just me, unclaimed, undirected. One afternoon, I went to the market and saw a woman about my age struggling with a bag of oranges. I reached over, helped her tuck it into her cart, and she laughed. A deep, grateful laugh that felt like summer. We started talking, slowly at first, then like old friends. Her name was Claire. She had just moved here to be closer to her daughter, who, as it turned out, was often too busy to visit. I knew that song. We got coffee that same afternoon. She talked about her grandkids, like someone showing photos of a country she wasn't allowed to visit. I told her about the group chat. She winced. "That's cruel," she said. I shrugged. "It's casual, and that's worse." Claire smiled. "Want to come to my book club next week? We mostly drink wine and argue about plots." I said yes. That night, back in my quiet house, I sat with the lamp on low and thought, maybe this is how it starts. Not with confrontation or declarations, but with oranges and laughter and women who understand. Maybe I don't need a big moment of reclamation. Maybe I just need moments. Small, sturdy ones. Real ones. I didn't check my phone that night. And for the first time in weeks, I didn't wonder if anyone was checking on me either. The book club met in a modest living room filled with second-hand furniture and the smell of cinnamon tea. There were 6 of us that evening, counting me. Claire introduced me as the one I told you about, the Thanksgiving exile. They all laughed, not cruelly, but with the knowing kind of humor only women over 60 can share. It was the laugh of survivors, of women who've been called dramatic for having needs, or forgotten while still alive. The book was forgettable, some historical fiction with a love story tucked inside. but the conversations it stirred were not. We talked about daughters who stopped calling, about husbands who had gone quiet before they'd even died, about what it felt like to become invisible in your own family. A woman named Myra told us how her granddaughter once asked, "Were you ever young?" Like it was a fairy tale. Another, Janet, confessed she'd once practiced faking a smile in the mirror before dinner with her son, just to survive 2 hours of being tolerated. No one pitied each other. That was the beauty of it. We shared, nodded, refilled each other's cups. There were no lessons or silver linings, just space. Space to say the thing out loud and have it land on ears that didn't flinch. That night, when I got home, I felt full. Not from the tea or the cookies, but from being seen. Really seen. I hadn't realized how long I'd been speaking into a void until someone finally answered back. The next morning, I woke to a text from Colleen. "Hope you're okay. We're all a little confused why you're being distant." Distant. That word again. As if I had drifted, as if I hadn't been pushed. I didn't respond right away. I let the message sit. I washed the dishes slowly, feeling the heat of the water on my hands. I watered my succulents. I made toast. Only then did I open the phone again. I typed, "You're confused? That surprises me." She replied almost instantly, "Well, you've just been different." I stared at that sentence. Different. Because I'd stopped asking to be included. Because I'd stopped chasing a seat at a table where my name was already scratched out. I wrote, "I'm not different. I'm just done pretending I don't notice." There was no reply. Not that morning. Not that afternoon. Later, I received a message from Dan. "Why are you attacking Colleen? She's trying." I didn't respond. Because trying would have looked like a phone call. Trying would have looked like, "I'm sorry." Trying wouldn't have involved removing me from a space I helped build. The next Thursday, I hosted the book club at my place. I set out a cheese plate, brewed tea, put on a record, soft jazz, nothing too fancy. They arrived with scarves and wine and easy chatter. My living room, usually quiet and a little too tidy, filled with laughter and opinions about men in novels and men in general. I watched them settle into the old couches I'd once covered in plastic for my grandchildren. Now they were just mine. No crumbs, no rules, just warmth. We stayed late. Myra helped me rinse teacups. Janet complimented my floral curtains. Claire asked if I'd ever considered going on a cruise. "They've got senior discounts and zero judgment." She winked. After they left, I stood at the window and looked out at the street. The porch light hummed gently. My phone buzzed again. Dan. "You've changed?" This time, I replied without hesitating. "No, I've returned to myself." I placed the phone down, steeped another cup of tea, and sat in my chair, knowing full well I hadn't changed. I'd just stopped asking for permission. The diner wasn't special. Vinyl booths, sticky menus, a waitress who called everyone on. But it was late, and I didn't feel like going home yet. The kind of night when silence echoes too loud through the walls. So I slid into a booth by the window, ordered a slice of pecan pie and coffee, and sat alone, watching headlights blur past. That's when she came in, a woman maybe a decade younger than me, but with eyes that had seen plenty. She had a tote bag that looked like it carried everything she owned, and shoes that had walked farther than they should have. She took the booth across from mine, ordered toast and hot water, then sat staring into the middle distance like she was holding something fragile in her chest. After a while, our eyes met. She gave a half smile, the kind that doesn't rise past the lips. "You come here often?" she asked. "Only when my house feels too quiet," I said. She nodded, like she understood that perfectly. Same. Her name was Jean. She'd been a nurse, lost her pension in a bad investment her ex made before he left. He took the retirement, she said, and I took the dog. Guess who lived longer? We laughed, not because it was funny, but because laughing still felt better than not. She asked if I had kids. I hesitated. Then I said, I have two, a son and a daughter. They have their own families now. She raised an eyebrow. Close? I sipped my coffee. We were. Jean nodded, like she knew what I meant without needing details. She told me her son lived in Oregon, hadn't called in 6 months. Last I heard, his wife didn't want too many influences around the baby. I guess I'm an influence. We sat there, two women with invisible bruises, eating pie and toast under fluorescent lights. She reached into her bag, pulled out a notebook, worn, leather-bound, stuffed with papers and receipts and folded corners. This, she said, is what I write when I feel like I might disappear. I asked if I could see. She hesitated, then handed it over. Inside were pages of poems, letters never sent, prayers rewritten in her own words. One read, I used to be someone's mother. I still am. But now I'm a lesson they won't say out loud. I handed it back gently. That's beautiful, I said. It's survival, she replied. We talked for hours about the way people forget that love requires tending, about how silence isn't peace if you were never invited to speak, about how neither of us wanted revenge, just to be remembered in full colour, not in past tense. When the check came, I paid it before she could argue. You didn't have to do that, she said. I know, I replied, but I wanted to. We walked out together. The night had gotten colder, the kind that crept into your joints. At the curb, we hugged. I'm glad I came in tonight, she said. Me too. When I got home, I took out my own notebook, the one I hadn't touched in years. I opened to a blank page and wrote, Tonight I was seen. And I saw her too. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like someone fading. I felt like someone arriving. The library smelled just the way I remembered, dust, ink, and time. I hadn't been inside in years, not since my grandson's science project sent us scrambling for books on volcanoes. Back then, I held his hand while he checked out a stack taller than his head. Now, I walked in alone. Claire had told me about the local book club that met in the library's basement every other Tuesday. Not her club. This one was public, open to anyone with a library card and an opinion. It's hit or miss, she warned. But when it hits, it really hits. I signed up before I could talk myself out of it. The first meeting was chaotic in that charming way things get when you mix strong personalities and weak coffee. A retired drama teacher insisted on reading entire chapters aloud in accents. A woman named Joanne kept forgetting character names but remembered every meal described in the book. We were supposed to discuss the plot, but ended up arguing over whether the main character had actually loved her husband or just stayed out of habit. I didn't say much that first night. I listened, watched, felt the old muscle of presence stretch again. The second meeting, I brought cookies. The kind I used to bake for PTA meetings and bake sales, the kind with cinnamon and nutmeg, and just enough crisp at the edges. They were gone before the first chapter got mentioned. By the third meeting, they knew my name. They laughed when I rolled my eyes at the drama teacher's impersonations. They asked what I thought, and waited for the answer. And so I spoke, not just about books, about memories, about silence, about what happens when your life shrinks to the space between a phone call that never comes and a holiday card signed only by the grandkids. Someone listened, someone nodded, and it didn't matter that they weren't related to me. They saw me. Joanne hugged me after the fourth meeting. She said, "You remind me of my aunt, the one who always smelled like cloves and said the hardest things with a smile." I smiled back. I used to be that woman. Maybe I still was. That week, I got a message from my daughter. "Saw a picture of you on the library's Facebook page. You looked happy." No apology. Just surprise. As if my happiness had to be scheduled with her permission. I didn't reply. Instead, I signed up for 2 more events. A poetry reading, a memoir writing workshop. Nothing fancy, nothing loud, just places where my voice still counted. At the end of the month, the librarian handed me a small envelope. "We're starting a mentor group," she said. "Older readers pairing up with younger ones. You'd be perfect." I took the envelope, said I'd think about it. But I already knew the answer. I had spent years being useful only in the roles they assigned. Babysitter, cook, placeholder. Now I was picking my own labels: reader, speaker, mentor, and maybe, just maybe, woman, still becoming. The call came late on a Wednesday. I was folding towels, the kind of quiet task that makes you feel useful without needing to think too much. My phone lit up with Dan's name. I let it ring twice before answering. "Hey, Mom." His voice was tight, polite, but tight, like he'd rehearsed. "Evening," I said. Not cold, not warm, just even. There was a pause. Then, "Colleen's upset." I said nothing. "She says you're pulling away, that you're acting distant." There it was again, that word, distant. As if I'd drifted like smoke. As if I hadn't been pushed into the corners until I turned invisible. "I haven't changed," I said calmly. "I've just stopped pretending." Dan sighed. "Mum, come on. We're trying." "No, you're reacting. That's not the same." He paused again. The silence between us stretched long and brittle. "I don't understand what you want from us," he finally said. "I don't want anything," I replied. "That's the point. I've stopped wanting from people who only notice I'm gone when they need someone to blame." He started to say something, then stopped. I could hear background noise, the hum of the TV, Colleen's voice in the distance. "Look," he said, "we're planning Christmas early this year. We thought it might help if everyone just got back to normal." Normal. As if that place still existed. As if I hadn't already packed my bags and moved on, even if only in spirit. "And by everyone," I asked, "you mean me too?" He hesitated. "Well, yeah. I mean, it'd be weird without you." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was familiar. That thin thread of guilt masquerading as affection. "Do you know," I said softly, "that you've never once asked how I felt about being removed from the group chat?" Dan was quiet. "Do you know what that said to me?" I continued. It said, "You're not part of this anymore," without even the decency of words. He cleared his throat. "It wasn't personal. I raised you, Dan. Everything's personal." More silence. I pictured him sitting on his plush couch, rubbing the bridge of his nose like he always did when things got uncomfortable. I thought we could move past it." "No," I said firmly. "You thought I would move past it. Quietly. Like always." He didn't argue. Maybe because he knew I was right. Maybe because he didn't have the energy to keep pretending he hadn't noticed what they did. "I'm not angry," I added. "I'm just done." Dan's voice was soft now, smaller. "What does that mean?" "It means I'm not coming for Christmas," I said. "It means I don't want to be back to normal. I want to be somewhere I'm not tolerated out of guilt. I want peace, not performance." He didn't answer. I waited a few beats, then ended the call with a quiet, "Good night, son." I sat there for a long time after, my hands resting on the folded towel. The house was still. No tears, no shaking, just the gentle hum of the heater and the quiet power of boundaries finally held. Later, I made myself tea, strong, mint, and opened the notebook I'd started after that night in the diner. I wrote, "They say I've changed, but I've only stopped offering myself up for dismissal." And when I closed the book, I felt taller, not better, not triumphant, just whole. The next morning, I woke to an email from Colleen. It wasn't long, just a few lines, clipped and polished like everything she wrote. "We were just trying to simplify things. If it hurt you, I'm sorry, but it wasn't intentional. We thought you'd understand. You always do." I read it twice. That line, "You always do," sat like a stone in my chest. I could see her typing it, probably with a sigh. Like she expected me to fold myself into grace one more time. Smile, nod, make it easier for them to be thoughtless. Again. But that's the thing about people who never apologize properly. They rely on your memory to be shorter than your pain. I didn't answer right away. I went for a walk instead. The wind was crisp, the kind that reminds your bones it's nearly winter. Leaves skittered down the sidewalk, the trees thin and tired. I passed by the elementary school where I used to wait in the carpool line, where Dan would run out with scuffed knees and a backpack half-zipped, waving drawings at me like they were golden tickets. I used to be the first person he wanted to show anything to. Now I was the last person considered. I came home and made soup. Lentil, the kind Paul liked best. The house filled with the scent of garlic and bay leaf, and I stood by the stove thinking about how long I'd been cooking for people who no longer tasted what I made. How many meals I'd prepared while being spoken over. How many holidays I'd hosted, then quietly cleaned up while everyone else posted selfies and praise for the perfect evening. Colleen's words echoed in my head. "We thought you'd understand." Yes, I always understood. I understood when she, accidentally, didn't include me on group invitations. I understood when she planned birthday parties during weekends I was out of town and claimed she forgot. I understood when she rearranged the dinner seating so I was always next to the kids, never the adults. I understood when she rolled her eyes when I asked questions, corrected me when I told stories, dismissed me when I offered help. And Dan, he said nothing. Over and over, he said nothing. That's the problem with sons who marry strong women. Sometimes they confuse loyalty with silence. I didn't blame her for all of it. No, that would have been easy, convenient. But it wasn't just Colleen. It was Dan's choice to say nothing, to keep the peace by keeping me out, to let convenience swallow tradition, memory, affection. I returned to the email. I typed, "You're right. I always did understand. But that doesn't mean I was okay with it." Then I added, "This year, I'm choosing peace for myself. I won't be at Christmas. I hope it's everything you want it to be." I read it again. No bitterness, just clarity. Then I hit send. The next day, Claire brought over a batch of lemon bars and a brochure for a retreat center in the hills outside Santa Fe. "A few of us from book club are going," she said. 3 nights, no phones, just reading, hot springs, and silence. Thought of you." I looked at the brochure, a photo of steam rising over mountain pines. "I haven't left town in years," I said. Claire grinned. "Then you're overdue." I stared at the image, the chairs on a quiet deck, the soft dusk lighting, and something inside me whispered, yes, not to escape, to return to myself. I nodded. "I'll go." And for the first time in a long, long while, I made plans that didn't include permission. The road to Santa Fe curved like a ribbon through the hills, The sky above, wide and endless, a kind of quiet only the desert knows. I rode in the back seat of Claire's car, tucked between an overnight bag and a cooler of snacks she insisted we'd need. Myra sat up front, humming along to an old Patsy Cline song playing softly on the radio. We didn't talk much. That was part of the agreement. The retreat center welcomed silence, didn't force it. You could speak, but no one had to. It was the first space I'd entered in years that didn't demand I explain myself. The place was simple. Adobe walls, wooden beams, cotton sheets that smelled faintly of lavender. There were no televisions, no internet, just a shared kitchen, a stack of books, and a view that made you forget what time it was. The first morning, I woke early, not from noise, there wasn't any, but from habit. I sat on the small patio outside my room, wrapped in a shawl, holding a cup of tea I'd made with hot water from the thermos in the common room. I watched the sun rise over the pines. It moved slowly, like it had all the time in the world. For once, so did I. Later, we gathered in a circle on the back deck, the six of us who'd come from the book club and a few strangers, a woman who'd just left her husband, a man whose grown children didn't speak to him anymore, a retired teacher who said only, "I'm here because I forgot how to be still." We didn't share full stories, just threads, enough to feel less alone. At lunch, I sat beside Claire as we peeled oranges and watched birds peck at the gravel path. "You seem lighter," she said. I thought about it. "Maybe because I'm not carrying anyone else's comfort right now." She nodded. "That's a heavy thing to put down." That evening, we had a fire. Not big, just logs stacked in a pit behind the main house, crackling in the desert air. Someone passed around marshmallows. We didn't sing. We didn't toast. We just sat, each of us holding something private and warm. I closed my eyes and listened. Not to the wind or the fire, but to the absence of need. No one here expected me to mediate, to cook, to explain, to smile when I wanted to sleep. I wasn't a mother or a grandmother or someone's placeholder. I was just Martha, still breathing, still here. On the last night, Claire handed me a postcard she'd picked up in town earlier that day. It was simple. A painted sky, a single saguaro in silhouette. On the back, she'd written one sentence. "You didn't have to be left behind to find yourself." I kept it in my pocket all the way home. When I returned, my porch light blinked to life as I turned the key. The house smelled of wood polish and time, the kind of scent that had always reminded me of order. But now, it just smelled like mine. In the hallway, my phone blinked with messages. From Dan, from Colleen, from the group chat I'd been quietly re-added to. I didn't open them. Instead, I unpacked slowly, hung my shawl on the chair, made tea, sat by the window and placed the postcard on the sill. And I let the silence stay a little longer. It no longer frightened me. It felt like home. The Christmas invitation came in the form of a printed card. Glossy, heavy cardstock, gold foil edges. A smiling family photo taken in front of a fir tree I'd never seen. Dan in a sweater I didn't recognize. Colleen with a new haircut. The kids arranged like catalogue models, all of it staged, all of it pristine. At the bottom, Christmas dinner at our house, December 24th, 5 p.m, RSVP by December 10th. There was no note, no handwriting, just my name and address on the envelope. It felt less like an invitation, more like a marketing flyer from a family I used to know. I placed it on the table, stared at it for a while. I had just returned from Santa Fe. My bags weren't even unpacked yet. I was still carrying that postcard from Claire, like a shield in my coat pocket. The idea of squeezing back into their carefully staged world, of pretending nothing had cracked, Felt like slipping into a dress 2 sizes too small. So I didn't RSVP. I made my own reservation. This time I chose the restaurant carefully, not the usual diner or chain spot, but a place downtown with soft lighting and linen napkins. A place people went to celebrate something, even if that something was simply surviving the year. "Table for one," I told the hostess. She didn't blink. On Christmas Eve, I dressed slow, not for anyone, just for me. I wore my good earrings, the ones Paul gave me our third Christmas. I pinned up my hair, I dabbed perfume at my wrists. And when I looked in the mirror, I saw someone I recognized, not the version they ignored, not the version they expected, just me. The restaurant was quiet, but warm. Families murmured across their tables. Couples clinked glasses. A young man with a violin played carols near the bar. Slow, soft, aching with memory. My server, a girl no older than 20, smiled without pity when she set down the menu. "I love your earrings," she said. "They look like they've seen stories." "They have," I smiled. "They've heard more than I have some days." I ordered duck, a glass of red wine, and for dessert, creme brulee. I didn't check my phone, though I felt it buzz twice. Once, maybe Dan. Once, probably Colleen. But I had already RSVP'd, to myself, and I had shown up. As the check came, the young violinist walked by and said, "Merry Christmas, Ma'am." Not sweetheart, not hon, just Ma'am, with respect. I nodded. "Same to you." I walked home under streetlights that blinked like gentle bells. In windows, families gathered. Laughter muffled by glass. Trees twinkled in quiet corners. And still, I didn't feel alone. I felt full. Not from duck or wine or dessert, but from something else. From choosing. From not waiting to be invited into joy, but carving a seat for myself at my own table. When I reached my door, I paused. I didn't need their apology anymore. I had already accepted my own. The morning after Christmas, I sat at my kitchen table with a pot of coffee and the kind of stillness that no longer unnerved me. The postcard from Santa Fe was still on the sill. The house smelled faintly of rosemary and something else. Peace, maybe. My phone sat untouched. 27 missed messages. Most from Dan, a few from Colleen, one from my daughter Julia, who lived out east and rarely called unless someone was in the hospital. Dan's first message. "We waited. Thought maybe you'd surprise us." Then, "It felt wrong without you." Then, a photo. The kids at the table wearing paper crowns from the crackers I used to bring every year. Their smiles didn't reach their eyes. Next. "I know you're upset, but isn't family more important than pride?" That one made me pause. Pride? Is that what they thought this was? No, this wasn't pride. This was dignity. This was memory. This was the long arc of being needed until you were no longer convenient. I poured a second cup of coffee, stirred in a little cream, let it swirl. They had spent years telling me I was essential, then slowly replacing me with Pinterest boards, catered meals, digital calendars, until I was the one still bringing Tupperware to a table where nothing needed warming anymore. And when I stepped back, when I finally said no more, they called it pride. There was a time I would have crumbled under that word, tried to explain, to smooth it over, to beg them to see it differently. But not now. Now I understood that people name your boundaries based on what inconveniences them most. I turned off the phone. Not out of anger, just out of clarity. That afternoon, Claire dropped by with leftover sugar cookies in a tin that used to hold buttons. She wore a red scarf and the kind of grin only a woman at peace with herself can wear. "Was it awful?" she asked, curling up on my couch with a mug of peppermint tea. "No," I said. It was quiet. It was mine. She nodded. Good. I told her about the restaurant, the earrings. The young server who didn't look at me like a woman sitting alone was a woman to be pitied. Claire grinned. Sounds like a win. It was. She reached into her purse, pulled out a folded flyer. I think we should go here next, she said. February. It's a women's storytelling retreat. They're looking for speakers. I laughed. What would I even say? She raised an eyebrow. You? Please? You've lived through 3 generations and 1 group chat betrayal. You've got stories. I looked at the flyer. A cabin in the woods, a circle of chairs, a schedule that included phrases like memory as power and writing from the wound, not the scar. Something in me stirred. I didn't say yes, not yet. But I placed the flyer next to my teacup and let the idea breathe. That night, I did something I hadn't done in decades. I toasted myself. Not with wine, not even with company. Just a cup of mint tea, warm and quiet in my hands. To survival, I whispered. To the kind that doesn't shout. To the kind that remembers. I didn't need applause. I didn't need forgiveness. I had my own table now, and every chair at it was earned. It's been 6 months since that Christmas. The messages slowed, eventually. Dan still sends the occasional update, a forwarded photo, a vague check-in. I answer kindly, but briefly. We don't talk about the group chat. We don't talk about Santa Fe or the restaurant, or the years I spent quietly earning a place they thought was theirs to revoke. We don't talk about much, honestly. But that's all right. Some relationships aren't meant to be repaired. Some are meant to be reframed. From the kind you water daily to the kind you place on a high shelf, dust occasionally, and remember for what they were. My days are full now. Not busy, I don't rush anymore. But full. I read. I cook what I like. I mentor a girl from the library's new writing group. 17, brilliant and raw in all the ways young girls are before the world tries to shrink them. I tell her, keep the edges. They're yours. Claire and I are planning a short trip next spring. Just a train ride up the coast. Nothing extravagant. But it feels like something. Like forward motion. Like joy with no leash on it. And every Sunday, I take myself to brunch. Same booth. Same waitress. Same little ritual. A book in my bag. A cloth napkin on my lap. And no need to pretend I'm waiting for someone else. A few weeks ago, I got another card. This one handwritten. A bit sloppy. From Colleen. We didn't realize how much you held together until you stepped away. I'm sorry, I really am. We're not good at this. But I hope you'll let us try again someday. I read it twice. Folded it neatly. Placed it in a drawer. I'm not angry anymore. But I've learned this. Forgiveness isn't a key that unlocks the same old door. Sometimes it's a bridge to somewhere new, somewhere smaller, safer, where love doesn't have to be proven by enduring the same hurt twice. I still love them, but I love me more now. That's not bitterness. That's balance. This morning, I stood on my porch with a cup of tea and watched the wind move through the trees. The sky was soft, and the air smelled faintly of something sweet, maybe the jasmine I planted last year, finally blooming. And I thought, this is what it feels like to come home to yourself. Not in a blaze, not in a roar, but in the quiet decision to matter again. So if you're reading this and you've ever felt erased, not loudly, but gradually, let me say something to you that no one said to me soon enough. You are not too sensitive. You are not overreacting. And you are not a burden. You are a woman who has held more than anyone saw. Who stayed longer than she should have. who gave without keeping score. And now? Now you get to return to yourself. Take the long way home. Set the table for one. Wear the earrings. Say no. Let the silence speak for you. And if you need someone to remind you that your story matters, well, you just found her. Subscribe to Grandma True Stories, because here, silence isn't defeat. It's clarity. It's history. It's justice in a whisper. And justice? She wears lipstick, orders dessert, and leaves the party when she's ready, not when she's dismissed.